Welcome to the 9th week of this year's In Times Like These recap. Now, let's get into this. Starting with Wanda Mitchell, who gets a surprise visit from Owen Grant, who asks her why they haven't hung out lately. Wanda informs him that she doesn't want to give her family the wrong idea, revealing how Yvette and Udell worried that she and Owen had a thing for each other. But she explains that she still appreciates the friendship they have. Shelley Dorval visits her husband Jeremiah in the hospital, but suddenly they receive an unwanted visit from Devante Torres. The couple asks Devante to leave, but he asks if the police have any leads on who ran Jeremiah over. They tell Devante how that's none of his business, asking him to leave once again. Before Devante heads out, he warns Jeremiah and Shelley to watch their backs. Once Devante is gone, Shelley expresses to her husband how she believes that Devante was the one behind the threats and the hit and run, since they didn't stand by Devante's side when he was charged with taking Elvira Russo's life. Quinlan Franklin calls Pacho Torres, informing him that she told Ben the truth about Adaku Danjuma. Pacho isn't pleased to hear this, but Quinlan tries to tell Pacho how he can trust Ben, explaining that Ben has the only piece of evidence that could put his father in prison, which is Elvira's diary. When Pacho asks Quinlan why Ben hasn't turned the diary over to the police, she informs him that the diary is the only thing he has left of his late aunt. As for Pacho, he hopes that Ben changes his mind and turns the diary into the proper authorities. Realizing that her younger brother JJ is taking too long in the high school bathroom, Vanessa Dorval knocks on the door, telling JJ to get out. When he doesn't respond, Vanessa gets concerned. She rushes into the bathroom, seeing JJ in shock, noticing that he wet himself, and Max unconscious on the floor with substances next to him. She begins to ask JJ what happened, as he's unable to answer. Vanessa rushes to Max's side, performing CPR as she asks her younger brother to get help. JJ continues to remain still. Then she makes it clear that if Max doesn't get help fast, then he could lose his life, pleading with JJ to snap out of it. JJ eventually starts to snap out of it and calls for help as Vanessa pleads with Max to stay alive. Once the ambulance carries Max away, JJ asks his older sister if she thinks that Max will make it. She answers that she doesn't know, expressing that she had no idea Max was experimenting with substances. At Valley Park Memorial Hospital, Gianni and Heidi frantically arrive and hear from Dr. Terry Burke about how Max overdosed. JJ and Vanessa arrive, confirming Terry's statement. Hearing the news troubles Heidi and Gianni. The parents are even more troubled to find their youngest son lying unconscious. At Theodosius's palace, Pacho tells Devante that he has a question for him. Once Devante asks Pacho what the question is, Pacho asks Devante if he has any plans if he goes to prison. Confused, Devante asks his son where this is coming from. Pacho expresses how the trial will be here before they know it, and for the sake of the family, he needs to know what Devante has in place to make sure that everyone is taken care of. Devante tries to encourage Pacho to stay positive and fight to keep his freedom. Once again, Pacho reminds his father how the result of the trial is out of their hands and that they need to plan out what happens in case they don't get the result they hope for. Right after Pacho makes this statement, Nichelle appears, asking her older brother why he's sounding so negative. Pacho claims that he's not being negative, but he's being realistic. Devante replies that the facts are that he didn't take Elvira's life and that he has a good lawyer to prove it, especially since there's no physical evidence against him. Even though Pacho states that Devante could still have a motive, Nichelle asks Pacho what the motive could have possibly been, since it didn't seem like Elvira was going to expose their affair to anyone. One last time, Pacho states how the family needs to prepare for the worst. As for Devante, he tells Pacho how he's working hard to make sure that the worst doesn't happen. At the Dorval estate, Shelly and Vanessa asks JJ if he's sure he's okay. JJ tries telling his mom that he's fine, but she states that what he saw was troubling. Annoyed, JJ asks if he's supposed to feel as disturbed as her just because he's schizophrenic. Shelly tries to assure her son how that's not the case. Then Vanessa reminds JJ how they could have witnessed Max take his final breaths. JJ replies how they didn't. Then Vanessa reminds him how hard it was for him to snap out of it, which Shelly didn't realize. Angered, JJ asks Vanessa why she had to mention that. Vanessa apologizes, stating how it just slipped out. Shelly, wanting the truth from Vanessa, asks her daughter how JJ seemed when she found him in the bathroom. Reluctantly, Vanessa admits that JJ wouldn't respond to her, believing how that could have just happened to anyone. Before Shelly has the chance to say anything, JJ tells Vanessa how he's not just anyone, walking off. Vanessa tries to keep JJ in the room, but Shelly allows him to have time alone. Vanessa expresses that even though she felt like Max was guilty of what he allegedly did to Yvette, the last thing she wanted was to see him lose his life. In response, Shelly consoles her daughter. Heidi sorrowfully sits by Max's side as Johnny asks his wife if she wants anything. She tells Johnny how she wants to turn back the clock and ensure that Max never felt this sort of pain. As soon as Johnny tries to assure Heidi that their son will pull through, she tells Johnny that Max wouldn't be in this position if someone had been keeping an eye on him, as they should have. Irritated, Johnny begins to ask Heidi what she's trying to imply. She goes on to state that after she was kicked out of the estate, Max started skipping school and experimenting with substances, assuming that Quinlan must have been distracting him from his responsibility. Angered, Gianni advises Heidi to remember exactly why she's no longer living in the estate. This causes them to blame each other, bringing up their affairs. Then Ben walks in, scolding his parents for fighting while Max is fighting for his life. Embarrassed, Gianni and Heidi apologize, appreciating Ben for stopping by. He begins to ask what happened. Once he's informed that Max overdosed, Heidi tells Ben how he should take a wild guess as to where he got it. Ben immediately storms off, causing Johnny to ask what that was about. At Quinlan's apartment, she gets word that there was an overdose at the high school. Just as she begins to ask Zeke about the situation, the door knocks. Immediately, Ben barges in and pins Zeke against the wall. Wanda arrives at the Mitchell estate, ready to pick Yvette up to spend time at the apartment. As soon as Yvette sees her mother, Lorenzo Russo angrily walks in, asking the Mitchells if they're happy that they pushed Max to the edge. Of course, the Mitchells have no idea what Lorenzo is talking about. He angrily informs them that Max is in the hospital. Shocked, Yvette asks Lorenzo what happened to him. Lorenzo reveals that Max had just overdosed, shocking Yvette. In response, Udell and Wanda remind Lorenzo how Max's older brother is an addict and most likely picked up those bad habits from him. This angers Lorenzo even more, wondering if they don't care if he has almost lost another member of his family. Even though Wanda and Udell express how that's the last thing they wanted, they still feel like Max is responsible for his own choices. Angered, Lorenzo warns the Mitchells that if Max doesn't make it out of this coma, then they will face his wrath. Once Lorenzo walks off, Yvette is troubled, expressing how this is all of her fault. Wanda and Udell try to assure Yvette that what happened to Max wasn't her fault, but she's adamant that she wants to drop the charges. As soon as they tell Yvette that, even though Max has been seriously hurt, Max needs to pay for his crimes, Yvette tells them how Max never forced himself on her. Yulissa Torres is on the phone with Vanessa, telling her friend how she heard that she and JJ found Max, wondering how Vanessa and JJ are doing. Then Yulissa asks if Vanessa finally believes that Max has been innocent all along. The response which Vanessa gives is that even though she was troubled to see Max like that, it doesn't erase her feelings about his guilt. Frustrated, Yulissa tells Vanessa how she hasn't seen how defeated and depressed he has been lately. According to Vanessa, that's only a sign of a guilty conscience. As for Yulissa, she feels like it was a call for help which was overlooked, explaining that Max was trying to take his own life purposely. Even though Vanessa feels bad that Max felt like he needed to choose that path, it seems clear to her that Max couldn't handle facing the consequences of his actions. Yulissa questions if she would have thought Max was innocent if he fought the charges. Vanessa tells her friend that the bottom line is that Max needs to face the consequences of his actions and get the help he needs. Yulissa agrees that Max needs help, but tells Vanessa how she needs to recognize the factors that led Max to try to take his own life, the pressure of the charges, and the personal attacks against him. Just because Vanessa recognizes those factors, she expresses how that still doesn't make Max innocent. Before ending the call, Yulissa tells Vanessa that just like how she prayed for her salvation, she'll be praying that Vanessa sees the truth and also prays that God comforts her for the guilt she'll feel once the truth is fully exposed. Alan and Clarice arrive at the hospital to visit Max. Heidi and Gianni give them time with Max. Once the two of them are outside of the room, Gianni reminds Heidi how she told Ben to take a guess as to who sold the substances to Max, wondering what she knows. She tells Gianni how he should ask his new girlfriend. Annoyed, Gianni tells his wife how he's in no mood for games, asking Heidi what this has to do with Quinlan. Heidi informs Gianni that Quinlan's younger brother Zeke is a dealer and is 100% certain that Zeke sold substances to their son. Gianni is in disbelief. Then Heidi tells her husband how she has no reason to lie. She goes on to tell her husband that she'll ensure that Zeke pays for almost costing their son his life, then wonders if he'll end his relationship with Quinlan. Gianni answers that Quinlan isn't responsible for her brother's actions. Heidi reminds her husband that Quinlan is Zeke's guardian and that she knew what he was up to and did nothing, which allowed their son to be harmed. She adds that Gianni needs to decide whose side he's on, Quinlan's or Max's. Feeling like Ben is gonna beat him up anyway, Zeke tells Ben that no one forced Max to take substances. Ben tells Zeke that he gave Max everything he needed to take his own life, which almost happened. Quinlan tells Ben how she'll handle this. He tells Quinlan how she had a lot of chances to handle it, but was too focused on other matters instead of putting her brother in his place. She apologizes, pleading with him to let her handle it. Reluctantly, Ben releases Zeke. Once Ben leaves, Zeke asks Quinlan why she would tell Ben about the dealing. Angrily, Quinlan tells Zeke how she needed to in order to get Ben to convince Heidi to drop the charges against him, but tells Zeke how he screwed everything up by almost taking her son's life, fearing that she'll come after him, especially since she broke up her marriage to Gianni. Zeke tells Quinlan how Heidi can't charge him without any proof. Quinlan agrees, telling Zeke to flush everything. Appalled, Zeke tells Quinlan how she should know, more than anyone, how dangerous that is. When Quinlan asks her brother to expound on that, he tries to keep silent. Once Quinlan persists, he tells Quinlan how he knows that Adaku is the big boss, due to Devante's connection, explaining how Devante didn't want him to be with Nichelle to begin with. After hearing the truth, Quinlan tells Zeke to turn himself in and make a deal. Confused, Wanda and Udell ask Yvette what she's talking about. Yvette admits that she lied about the whole thing and that Max never forced himself on her. She goes on to say how she didn't mean for things to get this far. Angered, Wanda tells Yvette that it's taking everything inside of her not to slap her across the face. Yvette explains that she didn't think that Max would go to prison. Furious, Wanda tells her daughter That's why they got the police and the legal system involved. Before Wanda has the chance to say another word, Udell asks their daughter why she lied. Yvette begins to say how scared she was when they found the condom, worried that she would be punished. Udell tells Yvette that their next step is to get the charges dropped. Sorrowfully, Yvette walks off. Once Wanda is left alone with Udell, she expresses how she can't believe that she allowed something like this to happen, troubled by the misery she caused the Russos. Udell tells Wanda not to blame herself, stating how he allowed himself to be fooled, also allowed their daughter to be sexually active under their nose. Udell assures Wanda that Yvette will be protected. They embrace, look into one another's eyes, and kiss. At Russo Jewelers, Vivian, who was revealed to be Lorenzo Russo's illegitimate daughter, pops into Lorenzo's office, asking how he is since Max was in the hospital. Lorenzo responds that he's grateful that Max is still alive and states that he just needs to pull through. Vivian hopes for the same, expressing how she hopes that he gets the help he needs. She also tells Lorenzo how she's glad that he didn't have to experience that sort of pain after experiencing the pain of losing one child. Lorenzo replies that he would never want either of his sons to face pain like that, which is why he was so hard on Ben, because he didn't want him to go down a destructive path. Before Vivian walks out of Lorenzo's office, she claims that Max and his family are in her thoughts, telling him that her parents are people of faith, which he appreciates. When she leaves, she tells herself that just because her mother is a woman of faith doesn't mean she is. Though she hates how Max isn't doing well, she's glad that it's an opportunity to get close to her family and earn her birthright. At Owen Grant's office, he sees the Mitchells enter in, asking them what's wrong. Yvette tells Owen that she's dropping the charges. This causes Owen to question if Yvette wants to press charges because Max is in the hospital after overdosing, expressing that just because he almost lost his life doesn't absolve him of his crimes. Yvette replies that all she wants to do is drop the charges, thanking Owen for being her supporter. Before they all leave, Wanda states how she needs to stay for a bit. Once Udell and Yvette leave, Owen asks Wanda what's going on. She explains that this was unexpected, telling Owen that she does appreciate all that he's done for her, informing him that she's also in the process of moving out since she and Udell are working on their marriage. He wonders what that means for their friendship. Wanda tells Owen that she'll still be his friend, explaining that once she has all of her things moved out, she'll tell him goodbye, but will always be in touch. Back at the estate, Wanda informs her husband of what she told Owen. Since the couple have forgiven one another, Udell reminds his wife that Yvette needs the both of them if the Russos are going to take their revenge. Before Quinlan arrives at work, Gianni pays her a visit. He tells her how she never called him about Max. She tells him how she wanted to give him some time. Gianni responds by asking if she's been avoiding him because her younger brother was the one who gave his son substances. Quinlan apologizes to Gianni about what happened to Max, which causes him to ask why she hasn't turned Zeke in. She reminds Gianni how Zeke is everything that she has left. Gianni reminds Quinlan how Max almost lost his life because of her brother and doesn't want to see him get away with anything. Most of all, he doesn't want her to protect Zeke. Quinlan replies that she will do whatever it takes to protect Zeke, stating how clear it is that she failed him. He reminds Quinlan that Zeke is responsible for his own actions and that he needs to face the consequences of those actions. She explains that Zeke will, but to let her handle it. This causes Quinlan to wonder what this means for them. Gianni answers that he doesn't know, then leaves. Finnegan Burke is surprised when Heidi walks into his office and is even more surprised when she informs him that Zeke Franklin sold substances to Max. Upon hearing this, Finnegan asks Heidi how she's so sure. The reply she gives is that he's the only dealer at the school she could think of. Puzzled, Finnegan reminds Heidi that she dropped the charges against Zeke, She tells Finnegan how there were complicated factors which made her decision, telling Finnegan that he wants this done as soon as possible. He begins to ask Heidi where her proof is. Heidi answers that she doesn't need physical proof. Once Finnegan tells Heidi how he needs to play this smart, she questions why. Finnegan reveals to Heidi that Adaku Bello is Kalu Danjuma's daughter. Upon hearing this information, she tells Finnegan that she knows exactly what to do. After school is over, Heidi confronts Zeke. Trying not to look scared, Zeke asks Heidi what she wants. She replies that she wants him to pay for what he did to her son. Can't get enough of the crazy world of In Times Like These? Then, treat yourself to a binge watch of In Times Like These. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You're not ready for what's to come, but tune in anyway.